Hello, good morning. Welcome to your morning program, The Dailies, where we keep you updated with some of the happenings from the front page of the newspapers in Nigeria, especially. And then once in a while, we look at what is happening internationally as well from the papers. I am Sela Elisha Dasham, and you can join us through Facebook, YouTube. Drop your comment, your views concerning any of the story we will be looking at from the papers, and I will be doing the program alongside Rachel Tansey. Good morning. Morning, Rachel. All right, let's go through the papers, starting with the Friday Leadership newspaper.
On the Leadership newspaper, courts will big stake in Kano Rivers Edo crisis. The writer says give 2 Kano judges 48 hours to resign over Ganduje's probe. Void Edo PDP governorship primaries. All details can be found on page 4. $150 billion loan reactions trail signing of Samoa agreement. Details can be found on page 7. Access Holdings lead in Bank Strength Index ranking. More details can be found on page 28. And we have Lagos retirees being with smile. More details can be found inside the paper, and that's all the news on Leadership newspaper.
On the Guardian newspaper, parties kicker scored deliver upsetting Edo Rivers Power Games. More detail on page 6. JAM clamps down on fake diploma certificate for university admission. We will record that admissions will be starting in September, and it seems that JAM have been having encounter with some fake certificate. You can do well to read more detail of that on page 6. NNPC denies $6 billion debt as fuel queues resurface. EFCC and FIU orders decry money laundering, terrorism financing. And here we have Tinubu enlist Dangote, Elumelu Ruwani in economic team. More detail found on page 3. And also we're having the output of the election that took place in UK. Exit poll, Labour wins landslide in UK general election, where we've seen that there is a new Prime Minister for UK. Detail found on page 5. EKEDC disconnect loot CMUL from electricity, over 252 million naira debt. It seems that the discos are really going about causing people who are yet to pay the electricity bill. You can find that as well on page 7. National Assembly seek Tinubu's endorsement for 300% pay raise for judiciary. More detail on page 5. Abductors of ex-Bayelsa commissioner got 40 years jail term each. More detail of the story can be found on page 8, and that's all on the Guardian newspaper.
On Vanguard newspaper, the big story, 21 LGAs in 10 states FCT submerged in flood. Says no release of water from dams. Cameroon's Lagdo Dam, one state LGs to safeguard lives of Nigerians. More details can be found on page 5. Federal government's debt to petrol importers exceed 9.1 trillion naira. On Edo Guba, PDP court wrestle over a Gadalo's candidacy. More details can be found on page 7. Appeal court voice sack of Rivers Assembly Speaker Amaule 24 orders. You can find details on page 8. In Lagos, 2,000 retirees receive 4.5 billion naira benefits. JAMB uncovers 3,000 fake graduates. More details can be found on page 9 on kidnapping. Federal government working seriously to secure ungoverned spaces. Coming from the NSA, details can be found on page 9. We have a current by Owela Kemfa on page 17. Sports on page 30. African 2025 Super Eagles draw Benin Republic, Rwanda again. We have a picture story where we can see Amashike visits IGP Obetekun, and that's all the news on Vanguard newspaper.
A New Telegraph newspaper, pension remittance, 27.64 billion naira recovered from defaulting employers. Corporates to be persecuted. More detail found in the paper. Fossil fuel, Nigerians' GDP faces $30 billion loss to eventual divestment. This is coming from Afrexim Bank. Detail found on page 25. Senate mandates committee to probe $5.792 billion Mambida contract. And we have Nigeria beat 5 countries to host African Energy Bank headquarters. Education sector was hit by Japa syndrome. This is coming from the federal government. More detail found on page 6. Zaki being protest, police arrest 18 suspects. More detail found in the paper. And the big news on the paper says court ruling upturned political landscape in Edo and Rivers. As appeal court void Edo PDP primaries, restates 25 suspended pro-wiki lawmakers. Edo PDP kick as Shayibu Obiana, Obidi, Ehama and others celebrate. On East Cam as Fubara Wiki supporters differ on judgment. More detail of both stories found on page 2 and 26. And on electricity tariff hike, stop killing Nigerians' economy. NLC is warning the federal government. And we have 7 Oluibadan in council chiefs pay homage to Oluibadan designates. No clock supporting same-sex in Sauma agreement. This is coming from the federal government. More detail on page 6 and 29. Uniben suspend academic activities over student unrest. Still on New Telegraph newspaper, Tinubu earmarks 2 trillion naira for economic stabilization. Inaugurate Presidential Economic Coordination Council. Dangote Olumelo pledge investment and job creation. Federal government commissions new tugboats to boost operations at Lekki Port. More detail on page 4 and 6. Federal government to Nigerians expect more rain, flooding in 19 states, including the FCT. One cholera spread may worsen. And here we're having a rider, I think, with some of the states that will be affected, including Akwa Ibom, Anambra, Benue, Bayelsa, Niger, Nasarawa, Rivers, and others at risk. Urges states, local government areas to step up effort to avert the impending disaster. More detail on page 3. We have a study that says tattoo ink can be contaminated with bacteria. For those who are fond of writing tattoo, this is a study that you should take seriously. On page 26 and 28, and here we're still seeing the 2,000 Lagos retirees that received the 4.5 billion naira benefit as Sanwo-Olu clears outstanding pension liability. We see them rejoicing and dancing, and this is what we want to see for every other state. More detail of that can be found on page 6, and that's all a New Telegraph newspaper.
On the Punch newspaper, 10 states battling flooding, 21 others at risk, federal government warns. The writer says government fears cholera may worsen as Lagos, Abuja, other count losses. Flooding kills pupil. Rivers to overflow July, Ondo, Kaduna, 17 others to be affected. Flood sacks 10 Ogun communities. Details can be found on page 2. Federal government plans 2 trillion naira economic revival scheme, inaugurates council. Nigeria to host $5 billion African Energy Bank. Details can be found on page 21. NNPC disagrees as report puts petrol debt at $6 billion. Labour heads for victory in UK exit poll. Details can be found on page 28. NPA launches tugboats to boost port operation. More details can be found on page 11 and a picture story showing that. SEC mandates Nigeria CEO local office for crypto firms. More details can be found on page 21. Driver bags 12 years jail for killing LATMA officer. Edo APC jubilates, PDP urges calm as court nullifies Igadalo's candidacy. More details can be found on page 14, and that's all the news on the Punch newspaper.
On Daily Sun newspaper, Samoa agreement, federal government defense decision, says action in the interest of Nigeria, detail found on page 8. And we have the big news, Tinubu seek Dangote, Olumelu and others help. Urges them to rescue Nigeria from economic stagnation, unveils 2 trillion naira stabilization fund, detail found on page 25. NNPC to establish 3 CNG stations and 100 sites, as Kyari says CNG revolution unstoppable. Coming from Rivers, we have coalition kick as Quadri states pro-wiki lawmakers. And also on page 26 of the paper, expect more river flooding. Federal government alerts states and local government areas. And on Edo State, we have court void the PDP Guba primary. APC candidate hails verdict. PDP says Agedalo's candidature intact. Nigeria gets hosting right for African Energy Bank. The article you can find on page 21. And on industrialization, Southeast governors, business leaders meet to partner Ohaneze on investment. Detail found on page 7. Federal government, we're seeing that the federal government is responsible for another strike in varsity. This is coming from ASU, saying that they should hold the federal government responsible for another strike in the varsities. Downside of the paper, many feared death in two-story building collapse in Anambra Market. Detail found on page 7. And we're still having the rejoicing taking place in Lagos State. That is the picture story on the front page, and that's all on Daily Sun newspaper.
On First News, Tinubu unveils 2 trillion naira economic injection plan to propel Nigeria's recovery. Outrageous, insensitive. NLC call for reversal of new electricity tariff. JAMB uncovers 3,000 fake graduates with illegal certificates. Court voids Edo PDP governorship primary. Prepare for more flooding, federal government warns state. The big story on First News, Samoa agreement, federal government defense pact amid controversy, reaffirms stance against same-sex marriage. Still on the paper, in Rivers, appeal court reverses sacking of 25 pro-Wike lawmakers. Lawmakers' seats remain vacant despite ruling, says Ugo Chingere. Lagos raises pension backlog with 4.46 billion naira payout to 2,000 retirees. Massive human capital boosts 24 million Nigerians to benefit from federal government initiative. And that's all the news on First News newspaper.
On Daily News Herb newspaper, anti-EFCC protests, NOA mobilized 4,000 staff to track violence promoters as agency activates civil intelligence network to assist the security agency. More data found in the paper. Nigeria lost $500 million to Yahoo Boys in 2022, coming from the EFCC chairman. Alleges they forced 71 international companies to quit Nigeria after hacking their accounts. More data found in the paper. As well, we have Tinubu promises to inject 2 trillion naira into the economy, inaugurates Presidential Coordination Council. Appeal Court reinstates 24 Wike loyalists in Rivers Assembly. CBN threatened to sanction banks rejecting mutilated Naira notes. Devastating flooding likely in Abuja, 19 states, and the federal government is warning. Ondo PDP candidate empty, says Ayedatiwa campaign cancel. And on Edo Guba, PDP forms over pre-notification as APC woos Ayedalo. Withdraw Nigerians' involvement in pro-LGTB Sawoma agreement. PRP is warning the federal government. It seems to be a serious allegation at the federal government as they're trying to clarify that nothing of such is happening. Court jails 4 kidnappers of Bayelsa ex-commissioners IGO years. More detail can be found in the paper. Edo Guba court voids PDP primary election. And here we are having don't write off Nigeria's economy can still be turned around, coming from Dangote. Assures citizens' current situation can be made better in a few months. More detail found in the paper. And here on the UK election, Labour set for landslide win. Exit poll reveals, and we're seeing that some of the candidates that came out during the election, and we're seeing that Labour is having about 410 seats there during the UK poll election. And that's all on Daily News Herb newspaper.
On the Matrix newspaper, the big story, triple judgment day, Wike Ganduje victorious as Obaseki is rattled. The writer says appeal court nullifies expulsion of 25 pro-Wike lawmakers. Resigned court orders judges chairing Ganduje probe panel. Ighodalo's fate hang in balance as PDP kicks against ruling. Details can be found on page 2. Federal government under fire over $150 billion Samoa deal as Tinubu ministers deny LGBT provision. Eric Ten Hag signs new contract until 2026 at Man United. Details can be found on page 16. We did it. Sir Keir Starmer incoming UK PM. Labour wins landslide as Sunak concedes defeat. More details can be found on page 3. Tinubu inaugurates Economic Council, unveils 2 trillion naira stabilization plan. SEC leaves requirements for crypto firms seeking to operate in Nigeria. Details can be found on page 3. Divesting from fossil fuel could reduce Nigeria's GDP by $30 billion, a report from the Afrexim Bank. Details can be found on page 11. Obi says Nigeria's monetary and fiscal policy is slowing economic growth. TASUED suspend exams after suspected cultists killed final year student. Nnamdi Kanu's release fast approaching. A statement from Charlie Boy. Details can be found on page 15. A picture story where we can see Vice President Kashim Shettima inaugurates steering committee to end open defecating, demands strategic partnership deployment of technology at the State House Abuja yesterday with the tag Clean Nigeria Initiative. And that's all the news on the Metrics newspaper.
On Daily Independent newspaper, Rivers Assembly Crisis Appeal Court dismisses restraining order against pro-Wiki lawmakers. With the write-up, pro-Wiki lawmakers remain sacked coming from the opposition reps, says court didn't void declaration of seat vacant. Edo Guba Agidado urged ticket intact despite court ruling, says the PDP. And the big news, Tinubu moves to inject 2 trillion naira to inflate Nigeria's economy, health, social welfare, agri, energy, power sector to benefit. President inaugurates Presidential Economy Coordination Council. Dangote says economy can be turned around within few months. More detail on page 29. Many feared dead as 2-story building collapses in Anambra State. Senate to probe $5.792 billion Mambida hydroelectric powered project. Sanwo-Olu clear pension backlog pays 2,000 pensioners 4.5 billion naira. Court orders 2 judges to resign from panel raised to probe the Ganduchi. More detail can be found on page 6. Nigerian CNG journey has commenced. Move irreversible, says Kyari. 18 state FCT to be affected by river flooding in July. Federal government warns caution flooding may worsen ravaging cholera outbreak. And downside we have protests against EFCC and OA mobilize 4,000 staff members to track promoters of violence. That you can find on page 6. Labour set for landslide win in UK election. This is coming from the UK election. And then we have a picture story as well on the front page of the paper, which you can do well to get the paper and read more detail of any of the story that is of interest to you.
On the Daily Times newspaper, Tinubu inaugurates PECC rolls out measures to strengthen economy. Court voids Edo PDP governorship primary. Details can be found on page 2. Expect more river flooding. Federal government warns state and local government. Emirship tussle. Judge restrains lawyers from granting interviews. Details can be found on page 8. The big story on our paper, Samoa agreement. We won't sign pact detrimental to Nigerians. Federal government assures, says agreement was signed to promote sustainable development, fight climate change, generate investment opportunities and others. Details can be found on page 4. Rivers crisis deepens as appeal court reinstates sacked lawmakers, nullifies Rivers High Court decision for lack of jurisdiction. Pro-Wiki 27 lawmakers remain sacked, seats vacant, says opposition lawmakers caucus. Enugu government moves to regulate mining operations for environmental safety and increased revenue. Details can be found on page 5, and that's all the news on the Daily Times newspaper.
On Nigerian News Direct, hashtag Big Sam Big Impact. All students inaugurate name library after News Direct founding publisher Samuel Abiyemi, which we can see has been on the paper a year after he passed on. More detail of that can be found in the paper. Stakeholders commend Tinubu's 1,000 kilometer Sokoto Bagadri Highway initiative, and Lagos become the first state to clear all pension arrears as retirees receive 4.5 billion naira. More detail found in the paper. Don't interfere with finances recruitment of tertiary institution. Tinubu won new governing board members. More detail found on page 3. Nigeria to host African Energy Bank headquarters. Applicants reject Ogun government extra 3.5 million naira on housing scheme. Applicants reject the Ogun government extra 3.5 million naira on housing scheme. The big story: Tinubu to inject 2 trillion naira in the economy, inaugurates PECC. More detail found on page 6 of the paper, and that's all on Nigerian News Direct.
On Financial Times newspaper, the big story: Labour sweeps to power in landslide. Tories heading for worst defeat in their history. We have Farage's reform set to do better than expected. Lib Dems on course for big advance in Blue Wall. Centre-left win resonates as populists gain in Europe. Tories handed punishment beating for failings in office, and that's all the news on Financial Times.
Alright, before we continue further with other paper review, let's take this time to actually take a break and let you chew the story. What do you feel about the court judgment concerning that of Edo PDP Guba election, as well as the pro-Wike that the court have reinstated them to go back and actually take their seat, and where we're seeing the opposition party saying that their seats still remain vacant. We're seeing also where the president is actually talking about injecting some money to the economy. We're looking at the Samoa agreement, where Nigerians feel that, there's something fishy about it, but the government is very clear that it is just to, boost the economy and create more job opportunities. So when we come back from the break, we will continue with a paper review. Please stay tuned with us.
Democracy is the theory that common people know what they want and deserve to get it good and hard. Join me every Friday, 7 p.m. on National Talk for analysis as well as in-depth perspective on issues as they unfold in and around Nigeria, as well as an opportunity to add your voice.
Thank you for staying tuned. It's still the Dailies. We have been looking at a number of stories on the paper, the agreement between Nigeria and Samoa, as well as we're also looking at the federal government warning that some states are prone to actually, talking about the flooding and that the rains will be heavy in July. So this is a warning to state and local government areas to do all that they need to do, especially as we are seeing that the flooding can actually lead to even more outbreak of cholera. So there is a need for everybody to try as much as possible as you can to stay safe and also protect your loved ones. And then quite a number of stories on the paper, the court ruling in Edo State and also in Rivers, as well as we're saying that Lagos State retirees are rejoicing because the governor of the state has actually cleared their pension arrears. So we hope that other states will also take a lead from there and do the same. I still have Rachel with me in the studio. Thank you, Rachel.
You're welcome, Sarah.
All right, let's continue with the paper review, looking at the Nature newspaper. GMO food not safe for human consumption, coming from DG NAFDAC. Here we are having Biosafety Energy Agency, NBMA, insists Stellar maize are safe. Biosafety Agency, NBMA, insists Stellar maize are safe. You can find more detail of that on page 3. FCT 18 state risks heavy flood in July. Federal government is warning. Gombe government to employ 500 agric extension workers to boost food production. That you can find on page 5. Here we are seeing climate change impact worse than global terrorism, coming from Dr. Tiri. Detail found on page 5. Tinubu targets 135 million MT of staple crops to stem food price hike in Nigeria. And then here we're having Bauchi governor goes tough on charcoal business. Promises residents 500,000 energy stoves. More detail can be found on page 3. And I remember I heard there was the same thing happening in Nasarawa State as well. I remember the first ten of Governor Sude, he made mention of the fact that they are going to be a ban on charcoal. And I think this is as a result of we have more people cutting down of trees. And you and I have talked about the importance of us having this trees. And then people keep cutting down the trees. We are not planting it. And then, the trees are what is being used for charcoal.
Yeah.
And then, the concern right now will be how many people will actually benefit from this 500,000 energy stove that will be given in Bauchi State. So we'll just keep our fingers crossed. We know that some of these things are very dangerous, but we hope that the government, when you take one thing away, please make a substitute for the people to be able to use eventually. I think this is just the bottom line of this whole thing. As much as you do not want people to cut down trees, using of charcoal business, I'm just imagining what it would look like not to have charcoal, but that is what it is as it is presently right now.
Yes, I've been able to see a person who was able to come up with an innovation where lesser quantity of charcoal can be used for a longer period of time. I don't know whether I can call it a condensed charcoal, but I don't know that science though, but where a little amount can be used for up to 4 hours, very little amount, and he did his research, he did everything that he needed to do and came up with it. I believe that this young man is just currently struggling with capital to take it out there to the world, because in the end is that we can't cut off certain things entirely. Because whether we like it or not, this charcoal is needed for us to cook with it and all of that. We've seen how there are more modern coal pots than what we used to have before now that consume lesser charcoal. Just the smoke, the carbon emission is little, and then it's given a safer environment, and it's also more economical because you spend less trying to cook and all of that. So I believe that there's just so many ways around these things. When the government decides to bring a substitute for these charcoal stoves, I believe that when you bring that 500,000 and people are able to benefit from it, don't stop it there. Make more available at subsidized prices. So you target those who really can't afford it, who are really in the use of this charcoal, and then you make sure they get it. Then for households that can't afford it, they still get it at a subsidized price from the government. But completely, when it comes to trees, Sele, if we don't use it for charcoal, we'll use it for furniture. If we don't use it for anything, we'll use it to roof our houses and all of that. So tree deforestation will continue to happen regardless of what we do. The real trouble there, and we see it happen in different states. On the Nature newspaper, we've captured it so many times in Adamawa. We've seen that of Kano. We've seen that in many, many states that are prone to deforestation, to becoming more of like a desert-prone area, droughts and all of that, planting trees. That is the only way we can combat deforestation, because tree timber is a natural resource given to us to be able to create many, many other things out of it. So even if we stop using charcoal today, we will cut down trees to make books. We will cut down trees to do one thing or another. So let's plant more trees. I believe that that is where it is. When you, in your community, in your village, we pass the road when we travel and we see those communities that are into making charcoal. You see them burning a tree, you literally can see the process happening. You know that 5 trees or more have lost their lives to this process. Honestly. So yeah, you go to such areas, and teach them the importance of planting these trees. Yes. When we leave it just for people like you and I, Seller, that already knows the importance, we are not even making charcoal. So we are not even cutting down trees. But where are those areas that we see it as a threat? Those people don't watch the televisions like we do, don't have access to certain information. This is where the message needs to be taken. Let them know that, you know what, as you're cutting this tree down, grow, you need to even keep making money from the charcoal. Where are the trees when you keep cutting them down without bringing them up, and then all of that? So much needs to be done concerning our environment, about our ecosystem and all of that. They are knitted together, and I think that as we are trying to solve one, we shouldn't neglect the other one, because either way we just affect each other.
Honestly. So for those who love eating roasted meat, I don't know what will be your fate as it is presently, because charcoal has been burned. So we look forward to that energy stoves being given. Still on nature news, we have Kano Ogugo LGA to tackle desertification of planting 10,000 trees. Now we're seeing Kano State as well is into the planting of that. And then we have World Health Organization urges Nigeria to improve on environmental sanitation. And then we have also on cycling, Cavendish breaks Tour de France stage record data found on page 20 of the paper. We have pictures there where we can see Governor Bago, I think, looking into the official ceremony on planting, giving out of fertilizer and all of that in Niger State. So you can do well to get the paper and read more detail of any of the story that is of interest to you.
On Sport Extra, the big story, Fisayo Dele Bashiru exclusive. I was born in Nigeria. I left Nigeria when I was 2 years old, so I really don't remember much about Nigeria. The decision to play for Nigeria is because it's the country of my parents. My decision to represent Nigeria. Details of this exclusive interview can be found on page 6. Knee injury rules Ayinde out of Olympics. Group D, Nigeria, Benin, Libya, and Rwanda. Banana Peel fans worried as Eagle face Benin again in 2025 AFCON qualifiers. It's host versus favorites, where we have Spain versus Germany for the Euros 2024. Swiss to exploit England weakness. More details can be found on page 2. Ronaldo Mbappe face off for semi-sport. That is France going up against Portugal. UFC clash, Adesanya warns Duplessis. Details can be found on page 2. Bologna accept Arsenal Calafori offer. Details can be found on page 5. Devils deal, Ten Hag extends United contract. Celtic ponder Ndidi move. Details can be found on page 7. On Wimbledon, Osaka Gove advances. Arena battles Japanese foe in Bangkok. More details can be found on page 2. Aegis seals permanent Milan deal. More details can be found on page 7. And that's all the news on Punch Sport Extra.
And on Business Day newspaper, high feed costs hurt Nigerians 120 billion naira fish industry. Let's look forward to seeing what the government can do for those who are into fishery. It's very important so they can be able to make profit out of this business. Still on Business Day newspaper, Naira opens window for firms' asset revaluation. And we have Tolaram appoints Adesuwa Lakoja as MD CEO of Lagos Free Zone. NNPC $6 billion payment backlog fuels petrol queues. More data found in the paper. Strings attached to $150 billion Samoa deal steer outcry in Nigeria. Data found in the paper. And that's all on Business Day newspaper.
On the Voice of Liberty, on Sporting Sun newspaper, rather, the big story, Super Eagles battle Benin Republic again, drawing Group D with Libya and Rwanda. Cruz weary of Rodri says Germany is ready for Spain. Camavinga set to replace suspended Rabiot. Details can be found on page 3. Ten Hag signs 1-year extension after avoiding sack. 80,000 Real Madrid fans gear up for Mbappe's presentation. De Bruyne reaches verbal understanding with Al Ittihad. You can find details inside the paper. Milan ponders 30 million euros move for Morata. More details can be found on page 5. Liverpool Newcastle in talks over £100 million Gordon, and we have £68 million on the Light and Ziggy. You can find details inside the paper. This is Man United to splash. UEFA fine awaits Bellingham on Euro 2024. Napoli sent new message to Chelsea over Osimhen's transfer. Injured Truth Ekan signs in Pokes 2-1 win. Kadri battles Japanese star at WTT star contender Bangkok. Details can be found on page 3. Trainer reveals how the boys can beat Anthony Joshua. Details can be found at the back page. And that's all the news on Sporting Sun newspaper.
On the Voice of Liberty, federal government raises mining rates by 50%. More details found in the paper. Coming from Kaduna State, Governor Sani reinstates monarch sacked by El-Rufai. Coming from Kano State, court gives 2 judges 48 hours to resign from panel set up to probe Ganduchi. And here we're having the LGBT outrage as Nigerians react after federal government signs $150 billion Samoa deal. Agreement signed in the interest of Nigeria, coming from the minister. Nigerians have expressed their outrage following the FG signing of the controversial Samoa Agreement, which reportedly contained clauses that compel underdeveloped and developing nations to support the lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender community agitation for recognition. More detail of that can be found in the paper. Federal government leads states to experience serious flooding. 148 local government areas to be overrun. Senate investigates Mambila hydroelectric power project, passes North Central Development Commission bill. And on Rivers State, we have appeal court reinstate Wiki loyalists as assembly members. The last story on the paper, 24 million Nigerians to benefit from federal government human capital development program. And that's all on the Voice of Liberty.
On the Nation newspaper, Tinubu injects 2 trillion naira to stimulate economy. Court voids Edo PDP primary. Details can be found on page 4. Court affirms Umale 24 others as Rivers lawmakers. Lagos pensioners get 4.5 billion naira. Details can be found on page 4. That's all the news on the Nation newspaper.
Alright, let's round it up with this day newspaper. Historic moment as Nigeria wins bid to host Africa's $5 billion energy bank, beats Ghana, South Africa, and Cote d'Ivoire. Industry operators launch continent's first oil financial institution. PDP scoff as Egadado dismissal as appeal court obtains pro-Wiki lawmaker sack. Detail found on page 27. And we have UK Labour Party on course of massive win. Exit poll shows party projected to win 410 seats with majority of 170. Keir Starmer to be country's next prime minister. You can read more detail of that on page 5. And on the economy, Tinubu unveils 2 trillion naira stabilization plan amid funding challenge. With the rider targets 2 million barrels per day of crude oil production. Inaugurates Presidential Economic Coordination Council. Declares mere 5.4 GW power capacity shameful for Nigeria. And then we have Nigeria's economy can be turned around in few months, says Dangote. See the story on page 5. And the picture story, we have inauguration of the Presidential Economic Coordinating Council. We can see the president with other members. Senate probes $5.7 billion, 3,050 megawatts Mambila power contract. Seek plan inclusion in Tinubu's legacy project. More detail in the paper. And that is all in this day newspaper, and also how far we can go on the program. Thank you, Rachel.
You're welcome, Sally.
Thank you as well to all our viewers, our supporters, and to the entire crew member. Until we come your way next week, please do have a wonderful weekend ahead.